Hello and welcome to The Slowdown. I believe it's a radical act to slow down and define success for yourself in our current culture. From hyper-optimization to profit-at-all-cost capitalism, we are fed a very narrow view of what success means. So I really want this podcast to be an antidote to that, a space for you to widen your understanding of success and what's possible by learning from others who have inspired me. Today, I spoke to June Angelides MBE, one of only a handful of senior Black women in venture funding, a founder, mother of three, board member, philanthropist, and speaker. We talk about portfolio careers replacing traditional jobs, why nonlinear is the new normal, the lesser-known stat that 42 is the average age women start a business, learnings from her grandmother, and where we are going wrong about the way that we work. I love June's outlook on life, and so I'm very excited to share this episode with you, recorded in London at Brazen Studios and sponsored by female-founded Greek swim and resort wear brand Kione. Hi June, welcome to The Slowdown.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
We actually saw each other quite recently. It was at your grandmother's memorial, which might sound like an odd place for two people to have last seen each other. But I think once people understand more about you over the course of this episode, I think they will understand that it makes perfect sense that that was the last time we saw each other. But to give a bit more context, I would love to know where you were raised, by whom, and what your early examples of success were.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in a place called Yaba in Lagos, and I lived with my mom, and we lived right next door to my grandma and my grandpa. And, you know, when I think of my earliest memories, it was sort of spending time in my grandma's house, sort of being her handbag, as it were. I was called Mama's handbag growing up, and much later in life, her walking stick, because I literally was the person who would be like, you know, let's go to the shops. And she was always up for it. I love going out. I'm not very much a stay-at-home person. And Mama was exactly like me. Mom was working, single mom. She raised me and my sister. And, you know, childhood was fun because we had a massive family. My mom is one of 10.
Wow.
And they're all really close. Majority of them grew up and lived in Lagos. After school, they all came back to Nigeria to work. And they kind of worked together. So my mom worked with her brother on the supermarket side. My grandpa started this chain of supermarkets in the 50s. And you know, they were all obligated to work at the store after school. So it really was what she knew. And, you know, when she was called back to Nigeria after having me, she was working in London at the time. It was everything to her to kind of work with her dad. And I saw that growing up, you know, sort of that sense of love and loyalty for like what he had built. And the opportunity to work with your siblings is really special. And I think that was really surprising. Obviously, now I work with founders, but watching the way they worked together, the respect they had for each other, but how much fun they had was always really, really nice to see. At lunchtime, my grandma would host everyone that worked in the family business. So I saw that sense of community and, you know, sort of family breaking bread on a daily basis. Sundays we'd get together, you know, with all my cousins. And I really loved how everyone made time. I'm sure they were all really busy and had lots of things to do, but every weekend they made time so that we all got to know each other really well. And I consider my cousins to be like my siblings. So really feel like I had lots of like brothers and sisters growing up, even though it's Jessica and I.
And I know that your family were also involved in other, like, kind of, I would say, media, entertainment, yes, not just entrepreneurship.
It was epic. You know, I feel like on so many levels, when I, you know, obviously writing the book about my grandma and editing it was a real chance to kind of go down memory lane again. But I do remember growing up, my mom telling me the stories of how Kool and the Gang and Shalimar had all come to Nigeria because my uncle started bringing international artists to Nigeria. And of course, you know, it's a startup essentially at the time. So he didn't have money to take them to restaurants. So he'd bring them to my grandma's house. So Mama would find herself hosting all these international superstars in her living room. The pictures are just epic to see. But even, as I was growing up, he was running the beauty pageant. So he ran the most beautiful girl in Nigeria. And for reference, he is Uncle Ben, who's Ben Murray Bruce, now Senator Ben Bruce. But he was running MBGN, and similar to his previous antics, the contestants were rehearsing in Mama's house as well. So the house was either full of musicians or, beauty pageant contestants, and they would do all their rehearsals. And we got roped into it as well because, of course, if you look at footage, there's always little kids handing out flowers to the contestants. I was one of them. Yeah. And, once in a while, we'd get involved in the singing. But I remember going to the National Theatre, being in the shows or, watching shows there. My family absolutely loves music. My aunt and uncle actually had a band in their 20s. It was called Ecstasy. And they had this really cool song called Ejeka Joe. Everyone should Google it. It is epic. And, it was a house that was full of records, full of songs, and media was just part of our lives.
But with so many different inputs, from entrepreneurship examples to music examples, entertainment examples, TV, media examples, how did you decide or navigate what it is that you wanted to study? Because you went on to study economics. So how did that decision process go?
I did not want to study economics. I'll put it out there. That was not my dream. I remember when my uncle first opened the radio station, I really wanted to work on radio, and I'd go in there at the weekend and I'd try and get into the DJ booth and be like, can I DJ with you, wild child? Or TV. Yeah, I thought I'd have a talk show. I thought that was something that really felt up my street because I was always the person kind of solving everyone's problems. So I thought, well, I might as well get a sofa and do a good job of that. So that's really what I thought I'd get into. And then I was convinced by my dad to do something a bit more sensible. And I did really well at economics at A-level. So it was something I was just good at, and it felt like the safer choice. But I kind of always had my eye on the entertainment side.
And then post your economics degree, it sounds like you then remained maybe in a bit of that safe space, like working in finance. What were those first few jobs like? And at what point did you kind of realize like maybe this isn't something I should be doing?
So I started out working at Thomson Reuters, and then I moved to Silicon Valley Bank. And I knew deep down that none of these corporations were the place that I was meant to sort of build out my career. I was never the person who was obsessed with numbers. That just was not my bag. And then, funny enough, I sort of had my first child. And I think that was the aha moment where I knew something had to change. Being the first maternity leave at Silicon Valley Bank was incredibly stressful, if I'm being very honest. I think we don't talk enough about when companies are not set up with women in mind. And I think the fact that there was nothing in place when I joined.
As in you were the first.
I was the first at the
ever
UK office.
Maternity leave.
At the UK office.
Oh, wow.
So
and they were like, what do we do?
Literally, what are we doing here? And I was like, oh, wow, how would I know? I've not had a baby before.
Because you were how old?
I was only about, gosh, am I showing my age now? I'm 42 now. I can't do math, as you can tell.
No, because I guess my point
20s,
is more to be like, at the age that you were then, which would have been mid to late 20s or whatever,
20s,
late 20s, that you were the one that was supposed to know what Silicon Valley Bank should do for their maternity leave. That's the piece.
I was being asked to shape it. And yes, it was an opportunity to kind of shape it the way I wanted, but it felt like a big responsibility because I had this sense that whatever I do now is going to impact the women after me.
Right.
So we better do this right.
Right.
So, I'm there scrambling to gather information. Bear in mind, I still not had a baby yet. So this is all new to me. And I didn't even really have this mommy group per se, because I think up until that point, you don't really think about it. I wasn't thinking, I need to start gathering intel for what it's going to be like for when I have a baby. So I did feel really lost, and I did feel like I needed to get it right. But I have to give them credit. They did work with me. I think I put together a pretty good package. And again, even coming back after that, I was the first to ask to work part-time. Mm-hmm. And that was a big shocker in terms of, what do you mean you want to work part-time in venture capital? So I'm venture debt at the time, but I was told that's not possible.
Right. That
was a big blow. I didn't realize that having a baby was going to cost me my job. And that's essentially what happened. I had to change teams. I was lucky in that I was able to join a new team, but it really was my wake-up call about doing things differently second time round. So when I had my second child, that was a more intentional time for me. That was a moment where I said, okay, I'm not going back to work with low confidence. I'm going to keep my brain active. More importantly, I want to do things my way, and I'm not waiting for anyone to save me. I think it's up to me to kind of make sure I do things on my own terms. And it's a shame it took having a terrible first experience coming back, but sometimes you just kind of have to have that wake up call and realize, the cavalry is not coming to save you.
You are the cavalry.
You have to be the cavalry.
Yes.
Because, and I think this is important. We forget and we think, oh, well, we'll have mentors and sponsors. Everyone's busy. Everyone's got their own thing. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to know exactly what you want. And this is why I think, and I love everything you're doing, because I think we don't slow down enough to take stock, to recognize what we need, what we're missing, and actually what it's going to take to fill up our cups. Because you cannot give from an empty cup. We know this, but I think we don't do it enough for us.
There, to your point of your second child, Ivy, something else totally is, this is where like June becomes June, and it's like you could take the opportunity of mat leave to do nothing, but you didn't. You actually started Mums and Technology, which you got your MBE for, created to teach mums to code. Tell me more about that story. So you go into that second pregnancy. Finance world moves so fast. You kind of, if you lose 6 months of it, you're sort of a bit behind.
100%. I felt like I did not know my job anymore when I came back the first time around. And that was the reason why I said, this brain needs to keep going. We're not switching off, because I came back and everyone was just way ahead of me. And I felt like I just never was able to catch up. A year in, I felt like all the male colleagues were, they've been promoted twice, and I was not even up for any kind of promotion. So it really felt like that motherhood penalty was hitting me hard. And it really took the cesarean. I had an emergency cesarean with IV, so I was forced to do nothing. And it was in those quiet moments where I really had time to reflect and really think about what I wanted the remaining, time off to be. And I realized I definitely didn't want to go to any more mommy baby classes. They were great for the kids, but not for me. I wasn't meeting the kind of people that I wanted to hang out with. I didn't feel like I was using my brain. It was just, soft play, and it was not great. It was not for me. So this time, I started looking on Google for classes for moms. I said, okay, well, how can I upskill? Coding was just going on the curriculum, and there was nothing, like literally nothing I could go to with my 2-month-old baby. Daytime, evening, nothing. And I thought, okay, well, let me try go to this General Assembly class. And I signed up and I called them and I said, look, I've got a 2-month-old. My sister will come. She'll sit in the waiting room and I'll go in the class. And they're like, yeah, sure, come, bring the baby. Epic disaster. She cried the entire time. I mean, I tried to concentrate. I had to keep going in and out to breastfeed her because I felt awkward. I was like, oh, I don't really want to subject them to watching me. This was before I kind of built up my confidence. Obviously later on, I was feeding everywhere and anywhere. You couldn't stop me. But it reminded me that, these environments were just not set up with us in mind. The other people, they were trying to be accommodating, but it was clear me going in and out the room was just not the experience they paid for. And then this is where the idea for Mums in Tech came about. Well, why isn't there a space where you can bring your baby, where you can learn? And I wanted to make it as affordable as possible. So I reached out to community. I think this is the first time I recognized the power of asking. I think people assume you just have to get on with it and, do it alone. And I always say, you don't have to. I think your biggest superpower is that vulnerability, saying what you don't know. And I didn't know how to build a coding school. So I reached out to some amazing people who had done it before. And to my surprise, were willing to help. And that's how we got going. I got offered free space.
Where was the space?
The first space was ThoughtWorks. And that was as a result of reaching out to a lady called Amali, who used to run Code First Girls. I reached out to her on LinkedIn. I'd never cold emailed anyone before. But she replied. And she's like, yeah, meet me for coffee. So there I am with my buggy going down to Riding House Cafe in Oxford Street. I remember very vividly, like, she gave me half an hour of her time, but I was super clear. I knew what I wanted from her. I knew I wanted her help and guidance as to how to make this happen. And she was like, these are the things, but you know what? It's down to you. And I think that sense of ownership kind of was a wake-up call. Like, you can't expect people to come and do all these things for you. You have to put in the work. It's not going to feel comfortable. It's going to feel messy. You're going to feel like you're not doing it right. But if you don't start, like, you'll never, like, you just have to kind of put one foot in front of the other and just start taking action. That's the only way.
And over the course of Mums in Tech, do you have the data recall to know how many people you put through the program over how long a period of time?
Yeah. And I still remember designing the first survey to kind of do a sense check as to who was even interested. And kid you not, within 2 weeks, I had 100 people respond. And I was blown away. I could not believe there were this many women who wanted to learn to code on their maternity leave. We had people at that very first session turning up, fully pregnant, some about to pop, some with buggies. And I remember thinking, how am I going to, give them this incredible experience that they deserve and I wish had existed for me, like on my maternity leave. So I'm trying to create something that I want to be an attendee of. And, it was something I was so intentional about. You're dealing with tiny people in the room as well. So we had nannies. I had SVB cover the nannies. I had incredible people offer to teach the content. And incredibly, in that pilot in September of 2015, we had 30 women. So I had to whittle it down from 100 to 30. And then within 2 weeks, I just felt really guilty. I was like, I need to take them all. Fast forward 3 years, we had 250 women go through the program. We ran 12 pilot programs and worked with people like Ministry of Justice, with Skype and Moo and the mobile company. And I just, every time I think back, I'm just blown away by the spirit of generosity in the tech ecosystem. But from the very first cohort, there's a lady called Sarah Titano. And off the back of the pilot program, she went on to Makers Academy. So she actually learned how to be a full stack developer and built her startup called Happity, which is still going today. She's raised funding. I'm an investor. Great. It's just such a nice full circle moment to have been able to invest in the business. And I remember in the early days, there was another brand that was kind of going head to head with them. They're gone and they're still standing. And I'm so proud of her.
I love that. But it's also as you said, it's not just about were they able to become full stack developers, but this confidence, this sense of I'm around other women who have similar interests. I'm using my brain in a way that feels conducive. I don't feel like I'm falling behind. I think that's the key part. And obviously for that incredible work, you got an MBE.
Which was a total surprise, Tiana.
Tell me that story.
I mean, this is the middle of the pandemic. I'm home and then I get a message from my boss. By this point, I'm working in venture capital. And he calls me, he goes, you need to check your inbox. I'm like, why? What's happened? I'm thinking I've done something bad. and I open it and I'm like, surely this is fake. He goes, no, this is real. I'm like, this is fake. And the next minute I'm bawling on the phone.
Because you don't apply for yourself.
No.
So someone would have had to submit you.
At least 3 people have to write an essay about you, kind of backing it up. I had no idea. Bear in mind, this is also 6 years after, 3. So my daughter was born in 2018. Mums in Tech stopped beginning. 2 years after. I had no idea that anyone is still thinking about Mums in Tech. So I'm blown away. And then I called them up and I'm like, is this real? Yeah. The woman is like, if you only knew the number of people that call us to verify that it's real. And she's like, yes, it is very much real. You've been honored for your work for services to women in tech. And, till this moment, it's one of the most special things to happen because I didn't do it for the recognition. Didn't think anything would come of it in that regards. I did this because I wanted, there to be options for women on maternity leave to have, an opportunity to learn and to upskill and to realize that they have a place working in tech. And And it was really nice to go to the palace. And Princess Anne was the one who gave me the medal.
That's so nice. I totally agree with what you say, because I think young people and just people in general have this sense of they chase the recognition rather than the work. And the reality is, if you do what you love and what you care about and you do it well, sustained over a long period of time, like the recognition will just come. It just comes. And you have to be thinking about the work and not the recognition. Like you can't aim for Forbes 30 under 30 or whatever it is. You have to like let it.
Well, otherwise it won't sustain you. You're not going to stay in for the right reasons. You know, it's hard to build anything. And you know this firsthand. Building a business takes it all out of you. So you need to have this really strong sense of purpose, or else you're not going to wake up every day excited. You'll be looking for that award. And when the award doesn't come, maybe you give up. And you do need to have something within you that spurs you on, that keeps you motivated, that makes you think, well, this is totally worth it. Even if it takes the next 10 years to get it right, it is so worth it.
Yes, and the recognition will come. And you mentioned there, obviously, at that point, you had moved to Samos when you got your MBE. Now, in the move and obviously planning to have a third child, you must have been like, okay, now I know. Now I have more confidence to know what I'm asking for. And so what was the Samos job interview process like in terms of your needs?
Yes. Well, I think that probably was the wildest interview, because bear in mind, my daughter was probably about 4 months old. So I had my third child. You know, I'd wound down Mums and Tech, you know, and I was being very intentional about like what I did next. It had to have purpose, and I wanted to work with really cool people. I knew that I wasn't going to go back into a traditional corporate setting. So I wanted to enjoy who I worked with. So I was very picky, and I just wasn't ready to settle. So I walk in, and I think on the day, for whatever reason, I just was like, not bothered. I dressed nicely, but I was like, you know, whatever happens, happens. What you see is what you get. I'm breastfeeding. I'm tired. We're just going to roll with this, right? And I walk in, and you know, we had a really nice chat, but it was very much like, this is my situation. I have 3 kids at home. Last one is 4 months, and she will not take a bottle. So if you'd like me to work here, I need to be able to like head home after about 3 to 4 hours. And I was fully expecting them to be like, no chance. They're like, yeah, that's fine. I was like, what? No chance. I mean, it blew my mind, because I think, first of all, not many people ask for what they need in that first interview, but I didn't have a choice. My child would starve if I didn't sort of get home to her to be able to breastfeed her. So I don't know where the confidence came from, but I knew that I was not prepared to have her suffer and me suffer, right, because I didn't have the courage to speak up. At that point, I just felt, what have I got to lose by just speaking my mind and saying exactly what I need? And after that meeting, I remember thinking, June, you've done good.
Even if they say no.
Even if they say no.
Yeah.
I think it was so important to me at that stage in life that I don't settle. And I think we settle too much. You know, we think, oh, we might not get another opportunity. And of course, it's an amazing firm. Like, who wouldn't want to work there? You know, the queue would have been out the door. And I knew that role was not like public. I was very lucky to have been told about it by a friend who knew them. So I was aware of the privilege in even sitting in that room and having the interview. But at the same time, I knew I'd be doing myself a big disservice if I didn't say exactly what I needed to make it work. And I think this is something that we all need to think about, setting ourselves up for success, because it would have been a total failure if I'd gone in and be like, yeah, I can work, you know, whatever hours you need.
Full time.
Oh, I'm at your disposal. Knowing fully well that barely had a setup with a nanny at that point. My husband was working full time. Who was going to pick it up? My mom lives in Lagos. My sister's busy. She lives a bit far away at that point. I think she was an hour away. There was no one like available to do all the things. Who's going to make dinner? Who's going to pick up my kids? And I knew that if I overcommitted, I was just going to fail. So I think it was say exactly how it is, talk about your situation, and let the things that are meant to come to you come to you. I really believe in what is meant for you
will come to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
8 years on, I'm still there.
And I love that. And I think Venture capital is an interesting space. I think it's something like 2.2% of the billions of dollars of venture capital goes to women. Of that, an even smaller fraction goes to women of color. How was that something that you wanted to try and tackle or get involved with?
It was personal. I think even considering the role was incredibly personal because when I was running Mums in Tech, I had tried to fundraise and it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. There just wasn't enough transparency as to what was the right sort of funding. This was super early as well. I'd say angel investing was still super nascent. There weren't as many angel investing groups as there are today. I think now they're very well signposted and people know where to knock, when they're looking for capital. Back then it was very hard, even though to an extent you would say I knew some of the VC community from my days at Silicon Valley Bank. But it was
hard for you.
It was hard for me, even with that network. It was pretty impossible. It just wasn't the type of business they were looking for. And it really brought back that question of, without having access, without having, gone to the same schools, where does one start when you're sort of starting out? And it doesn't mean that you're not building a great business, but if you have such a tricky start in even getting into the rooms to tell your story, you're not going to get this funding. So I wanted to be the person on the inside. And I said, well, I'm going to go advocate for, the underrepresented founders. I'm going to go inside, and I was intentional about the types of firms that I wanted to work with. And, Samos ticked a lot of those boxes in terms of the portfolio. They had a good representation of female founders. I knew Rachel Correll from Coro Kids because she'd obviously done some work with Mums in Tech. So she spoke super highly of them. She'd actually been 7 months pregnant when she pitched. And she got one of the highest sort of tickets from the firm because she's incredible. And I think that really stood out to me as, the kind of organization I want to do my work from within. I knew that at some point it would involve policy, and that's why I ended up doing the work with the task force.
Obviously, in the pitch process, that's really what a lot of your job involves, is like seeing a lot of pitches, deciding who you think you should back and not. There's obviously a sort of pitch process that feels the blueprint is very masculine for how to pitch well. And so I'm wondering, for women, has there been anything that you've seen that feels emblematic for you of strong feminine power or female leadership that you feel is unique in a pitch that is something that strikes you?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of some of the brilliant female founders that we've backed recently. Maybe I'll start with sort of level zero. We backed Ula and Irene, and they came in with such confidence. And I think what struck us in particular was they just knew their stuff. You can't fake that. You can't practice that. You just know it. And I think more and more the people that we have, the privilege of, and I always say it's a privilege to have these conversations because they can go anywhere for their money. And it's a privilege to sit on someone's cap table and to be a part of building their business. So the women who choose to come knock on our door that have these incredible accolades sort of behind them, they've done the work, they've studied, they've obviously got industry experience, and they've chosen to spend their time building something like really special. And they're happy to take our capital. I think coming in knowing that you've kind of got your armory, you've got your stack that you need to get this going, and actually money is just like a function. I think that's really key. That's what sets them apart from the ones who come in and are just not very clear about what that money's going to do for them, but actually why they want us. I think anyone you bring onto your cap table should be your choice. I think you shouldn't walk into the room thinking that the investor is doing you a favor. And I think with every one of these women who've come in and we've backed them, they knew they had options. And actually, they were very picky about who they were letting into their cap table. I think that level of pickiness is really like feminine and, it's powerful because you as an investor realize that, they got choices.
And on the flip side of that, you are one of only a handful, as far as I'm aware, women of color in the UK that work in VC on a senior level. Has there been times where you've felt that more acutely?
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was thinking about my what next. So when I hit 40, I wasn't sure. I was like, do I carry on? Then it takes a long time to know whether you're actually a good venture capitalist. They say it takes 10 years minimum. And as a multi-hyphenate with all these other interests, I always had this question mark as to how long would I be an investor? And for the longest time, people have said, oh, you need to set up your own fund. And I felt that pressure because they're like, well, you're one of a handful of Black female investors and you ought to be setting up a fund. And I had to really sit with that because there was a part of me that didn't feel like that was really me. But then there was also the other part that felt, gosh, is it my responsibility? Am I supposed to do this? Yeah. Is it up to me to kind of, make this work? And it can feel like quite a heavy burden sometimes. Because if I've been lucky to have quite a big platform. So I know I'm visible. And I feel like, yeah, the expectations are quite high sometimes. And sometimes you just want to be normal. I be allowed to kind of mess up and do other things that excite me as well. So yeah, that sense of responsibility and duty, definitely feel that quite a lot.
And what did you decide to do about the VC?
It was very hard. So when I turned 40, I first of all asked, and I've been told that this is not even a real sabbatical because I only asked for a month off, and they're like, "What? That's not a real sabbatical." But I did ask for a month off that year. So I took that to just really reflect, and as part of that, I actually asked to work with this incredible sort of transition coaching guru. Mm-hmm. I absolutely adore her, and they approved that, which I was so grateful for. So I worked with her in that period, trying just to understand and take a step away from the pressure, the duty. So I really switched off. I turned off all my social, I turned off my LinkedIn, and I just took time for me just to kind of get back to the crux of who am I? What do I enjoy? What do I want to spend the next sort of 10 years doing? Because we are all in go, go, go mode. And again, I wasn't having any more kids to slow me down. So I had to figure out another way to do it. And it was really reflective. We had a series of exercises that we did together. And I think that ultimately where I landed was, I don't want to run a fund. And it was weird to finally kind of draw a line under that, because the expectation, maybe even before going into that process, was that maybe I did. And then finally accepting that was somebody else's dream and that was the community's dream. It wasn't mine. So it took a while to feel comfortable saying it out loud, but the minute I did, I felt this huge sense of relief. And then it really came down to, well, what does it look like? How do I still engage with the world of venture capital? And this was how I reframed and came up with this venture partner role, where I'm more fractional, but I still get to do the things I love. I still get to support the companies that I love backing. I'm still an angel investor. But I think my identity was something that I was a bit nervous about. I was like, oh, who am I if I'm not June the investor, June the VC? And reconciling with, there are so many other ways to still get the job done and the things that I care about, because the reason I came into VC has not changed, and I'm just doing it in lots of different other ways.
I'm going to take these mid-episode breaks this season to tell you a bit more about a brand I have totally fallen for. In each episode, I'll share a different story to help you get to know them a little better. Keone was born when two Greek women, Lydia and Amelia, met at work and just clicked. They'd both built careers in fashion, Lydia as head of design, Amelia as a marketing director, and after their paths met, they kept coming back to the same idea. What if we made something together, something that feels like us? That question on a summer's day in Greece became Kione, a swim and resort wear brand rooted in Greek craftsmanship, made entirely in Greece, and has since been worn by the likes of Gwyneth Paltrow, featured in The Guardian, Greek Vogue, and Marie Claire. What I love about this story is that it starts not with a business plan, but with a relationship. Two women who trusted each other enough to build something together. And I'm over the moon that they have entrusted me with their first podcast partnership. When women support each other, magical things do happen. And so I implore you to check out this stunning brand. I'm actually wearing it right now if you're watching this on video. There is also a very special discount exclusively for the Slowdown listeners. Just put the Slowdown, one word, at checkout for 20% off your first order at kione.com. And the portfolio method, is that something that came off the back of that coaching conversation? And what exactly is the portfolio method?
2 years ago, when I turned 40, I think I had this feeling that the rest of my jigsaw was going to kind of fall into place, because I made the decision then. I transitioned then into 2 days at Samos, and I had all this free time. And I was like, surely lots of things are going to come up, because I've always had, the speaking, the jobs with female narratives, a bit of consulting on the side, advisory work, writing. I wrote for the FT. So I've always had lots of things going on at the same time. And then when I made the decision, I was like, surely that will just fill up my time. And then there was a drought. It was a very serious drought. And I'm not going to lie, it was very, very uncomfortable. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh boy, what have I done? I had all these plans that I would fill up my calendar. And for the first time in a long time, a lot of free time. A lot of free time. I did not tell people this, by the way, because I had to sit with myself and accept this free time and use it to rest. So the ideas were not flowing. I didn't know what sort of business I was going to create eventually. I knew that I wanted to, but for whatever reason, I was not inspired. Working with my coach, we really had to work on me promising that, first of all, I wouldn't be giving my time away for free. I wouldn't be just filling up my days for the sake of filling up. And I had to really sit with this. I had to go into this season of just sort of acceptance and just slowing down and learning to just enjoy the moments. And also, even though there were moments where some speaking things would come up, but maybe they weren't paid, and I had to just be like, no. And that was hard, because you have to set your bar. You have to know what it is that you're going for, and also not confuse people. And I think very often we're tempted to lower the bar when the things that we want aren't coming. And I had to keep reminding myself. And again, you can do coaching for so long, but you have to figure out how you're going to keep these tools within you. So I also, just did things that I loved, like started going out dancing more, which I hadn't done in years. I started reading more. I love my thrillers now, and just making time for sort of creative things. And then in January this year, I was asked to do a session at Wits End. So Wits End is a group for senior women in tech that I'm a part of, on sort of running different side hustles, as it were. Because, I guess people know that I do lots of things alongside being an investor. So I said, okay, I'll do a session. And I was meant to do it with another lady. She had the slides. I was just meant to kind of be the, her sidekick, as it were. It wasn't my main thing. Anyway, morning of 8 a.m., I get a call. She can't make it. And I'm like, holy moly, what am I going to do? Okay, it is what it is. Things happen for a reason. It gets to the time where, I'm meant to run this workshop. I have her slides, but I don't know them. They're not my slides. And I just start talking, and I realize I know more about this than I thought. And I was like, oh, I got this. So I'm like, shut the slides and I keep talking. And I think it felt very comfortable. I was forced to just sort of realize, I had what it took to talk about my portfolio career. I've been doing this for 10 years now, so why did I think that I couldn't tell people about what has worked for me? What is my toolkit? And I think we often forget that we know ourselves, but sometimes articulating it is where we may struggle. But in the moment, in being forced to just get on with it, I did it. And I think that was the aha moment for me. That's when things shifted this year. Started thinking about the content, started thinking about what I wish I knew at the start of my portfolio career, and came up with this thought that, wow, I wish there was an operating system for people like me that have all these income streams and very often feel very burnt out because you're being pulled in so many different directions from an energy perspective. You don't know what to charge. The number of times a speaking job comes and I'm like, I have no idea what to charge for this. There just wasn't any specific toolkit that addressed all these issues, visibility.
And the personal brand piece is interesting because I think in our society, the way capitalism is modeled is choose one track, do that track to the highest possible level, be CEO, be founder, be Oscar-winning actor. You're not really encouraged to have 6 different revenue streams because how do you then... What are you called? How do you position yourself?
Well, exactly. And I think, the phrase jack of all trade, master of none is the one that comes to mind. And I think it has such a negative connotation. I think people are nervous to show that they do more than one thing. They're worried they're not going to be taken seriously. And I often say that, this is probably something that I think about on a regular basis. When I'm in Samos mode, I'm 100% in Samos mode. And this is why one of the tools that we talk about is, the container days. So on a Samos day, fully focused.
Right.
I don't break it. Otherwise, your mind cannot handle the attention residue. There's a lot of neuroscience behind all of this. And you'll find that if you're switching between too many different types of tasks in a day, there's a context switching tax that you pay because your brain just can't handle. You need a reset in between. So I do try and be very disciplined about, sticking to the roles. And that's one of the things that we're building in. So I ran a 3-hour workshop at Huckletree, which I put together in 3 weeks with the help of some amazing people. Built a workbook, designed the lesson. I've never delivered a lesson before. So it was quite an experience, I guess, in reminding me that I can do a lot of things if I put my mind to it, my energy to it. I think it's very easy to forget when we're in sort of go mode. I think taking time to challenge ourselves to do things that are probably out of our day-to-day is really important, to remember your superpowers. And I loved it. We had 48 women turn up on the day, and off the back of that, decided to start building the tech that would actually get this to scale. So I think maybe about 2 or 3 weeks after that, launched the first version of the product, which was the portfolio method audit, where people give us their information around what the different roles they do, what drains them, what gives them energy, whether they've thought about how they charge, if they know where to go look for these rates. And it's been mind-blowing just to kind of see, we're getting 600 people landing on our website. The traffic is insane. People are doing these audits and they're taking action from the report. So I'm why didn't I do this sooner? I think there's a part of me that thinks that, but maybe, when we talk about timing, this is the moment. This has been, back to your initial comment around, when we reconnected recently and my grandmother, I am so convinced that it is my grandma. I'm very spiritual in that regard. I really believe in signs. At a Thanksgiving party I went to, I never pulled tarot cards, but at this party, my friend was like, go, there's a lady there, go pull a card. And it was the matriarch. And oh my goodness, I can't explain the way I felt when I saw that, and I was like, explain, like, what do you mean? What does this card mean for me? She goes, oh, that, there's the women before you that are guiding you and telling you that, you need to like listen and trust your instincts. And I thought, oh my God.
She knows.
She knew. She knew, Tiana. That was the moment. And then January, I'm like sitting in a bath, and next minute I just kind of get this gush of like energy in it. I just felt like Mama was there. And that was when I decided to finish that book, because the book had been floating in the family for like years. Mama passed away 4 years ago. The book was meant to be ready before she died, and it just kind of was in limbo. Nobody was owning it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to finish that book. And I reached out to my mom and my sister, and I said, why don't we just do it together? Why don't we just finish editing? It'd been written, but it needed like a ton of editing.
Because to your point, like it needs someone to lead the fray.
Nobody was doing it. So we said, as a trio, we're going to give it our best shot. We're not professional editors. So we roped in a developmental editor. But I think it was in that exercise that I sort of remembered sort of how special we are as a unit. It was always Mama, my mom, my sister and I kind of doing everything together, because our house were literally just next to each other. So I spent most of the day in Mama's house with my sister, and after work, Mom would come back to collect us, and we'd go up, have dinner. I'd come back down and watch movies with Mama. So we were always so intertwined. So I just felt like that energy shifted. And ever since the minute we started working on the book, I feel like it's been one good thing after the other, but the doors just kept opening and the ideas kept pouring in. But that was the thing. And of course, her book was called The Murray Bruce Matriarch. So Matriarch came up again.
I mean, you're in flow.
In flow, 100%.
And to your point there that you just mentioned about like, I'm older, is this the right time? There was some stats that you shared around the average age women career pivot is 39. They start a business, the average age is 42, become millionaires at 49, and the creative peak is in their early 50s. I found this extraordinary, as of course media sells us this idea of like the young entrepreneur, started a business in college, Forbes 30 under 30. What do you think that really shows? And obviously to your personal story, you're in that time now.
As my kids are getting older, my youngest is now 8, my eldest is coming up to 14, it feels a lot easier. They get it. They know why I'm putting in the hours. They're excited. My daughter is always like, look at my nails. Like they're recommending nail art because of the portfolio method. I've got my lightning bolt, and they love it. They see what is possible. So they are fueling me as well to go faster. And I am so up for being a millionaire by 49. I feel like that is 100% the dream. But it's definitely, the seasons. It is easier as the kids are leaving the house again to kind of pick up the pace.
And why do you think that is such little known data? Like why is my preconception of this like young, stays up all night kind of founder, if the reality is actually that women are starting businesses in their 40s and they're becoming millionaires in their late 40s? Is it just that it's happening quietly, it's happening without so much showing off?
I think the press obviously loves to hype up the male founders. I don't think we get enough around female founders that are doing really good jobs. They do exist. We've got some brilliant founders in our portfolio. But I guess, the competition is so much that they're just heads down. They're heads down, they're building away, but it's just so much easier to do it later on in your career. Again, you're wiser, you know what you stand for. This thing of negotiating, asking for what you deserve to build the business, I think that gets easier over time. That confidence, I think people like Debbie Bosco talk about this a lot. It just gets so much easier to ask for what you need as an older woman. I feel that now.
There's probably less of a desire for that same kind of PR media piece of it, and maybe also the media wants the like young, beautiful, our
Yes.
entire world is built on an idea of beauty that is like young, youth, all of those things. And they're just less interested in that story, even though it's statistically much more common.
I agree.
You've done so many extraordinary things in business, for women, in nonprofit, for family, for friends. On top of everything, you managed to find time for the people that you care about. A stage mom, whatever. I don't know what the terminology is for what you do. But for your 3 children, Adam, Iris, and Ivy, you manage the work that they do. So how did that begin? Because they've done acting and modeling and all kinds of different things. How did that start? What have been some of the crazy scenarios that you've been in that you're like, can't believe I'm doing this? Yeah. And also, is that something you want to continue, or are you a bit wary of, but when they become teenagers, I don't necessarily know if I want them surrounded by like the modeling industry, for example?
That was a good question. And we fell into it completely by accident. Ivy was such a vivacious little girl, and my brother-in-law was working in a media company, and he said, you need to just sign her up because we're working with this brilliant agent called Sally King, and she's got lots of really cool jobs. So we did, and 2 weeks later she got her first role, and that was David Copperfield.
Wow.
It was a bit wild because she didn't have to audition. It was a non-speaking role, but she was his daughter, which was it was pretty epic.
Straight in there.
Oh my goodness. So in terms of probably the wildest set that I've been on, sitting next to Armando Iannucci and Dev Patel and Tilda Swinton and Hugh Lowry, it was quite wild. I mean, they're just lovely people in general. They're just doing their job. As my dad was an actor as well, so he always reminded me that actors are just regular people doing a job. He very often, he'd do really cool roles with people like Harrison Ford, and I'd beg to be on set, and he'd be like, no, you're not doing any of that. They're just normal people. So I had a little bit of obviously a fangirl moment with some of these roles that they've got. Adam, he got into it a little bit later, probably about 9. His first thing was The Apprentice. Like, they had Mini Apprentice, and he absolutely loved it. It's great because it helps build their confidence. Back to your question around would I want them to do this forever? They have a choice. The beauty of this is it's building their savings. They're very savvy. So from a young age, obviously we set them up with their bank accounts. So all their earnings from their modeling and acting goes to their accounts, and we review it together on a monthly basis. And they go through it. They know what they're making. They know the interest. They've got junior ISAs, so they can't touch it. They get very cross that they're not allowed to touch it. But I'm like, look, it's growing, it's compounding. So we talk about money. They know why they do it. But it means for me that after a busy day in the office, I'm coming home, I'm getting the scripts from the agents, and we're rehearsing, and I'm having to do the self-tapes. Back in the day, it was trickier because it meant coming back from the office and taking them back into town for the auditions, because they used to be in person. Thankfully now it's videos, but it means I'm a professional video editor because I'm having to, clip and, get them ready and film and get the lighting right. But they love it, especially when they get to do stuff together, which they have in the past. In fact, I did a little cameo with them in Love at First Sight, which was on Netflix. I think it's still on, actually. I had to be the mom with the stressed out kids. I was like, that's very easy.
The question of burnout is something we talk about on the show. And I get the sense that like, you don't maybe get so much burnout, but that you're much more able to understand and regulate and know, like, I'm reaching my capacity. And, even in that job interview, like being able to say, this is what I'm actually able to offer you, rather than overextending. And I think too many people, I don't know if it comes from a sense of people pleasing, if it comes from a sense of expectation, societal, cultural, like the ways that we're taught that work should be overwhelming and all of these things, and we should be busy. But so I guess I'm wondering, how do you stop and regulate? Is there a part of you, maybe you feel it, maybe it's an embodied experience that tells you, I'm working too much, I need to slow down? And what are the tools that you take to do that?
Yes. And I think, it's really important to admit that I am a professional people pleaser. And I learned the hard way. So I did experience severe burnout while running Mums in Tech. So that was a time where, I was giving everything. I didn't know when to stop. I was obsessed with this idea of building the best business possible. I didn't switch off at the weekends. I just remember even the kids saying to me, "Oh, mummy, put your laptop down." And I would take it everywhere. I was always on it. And when I stopped and I crashed, and I developed type 2 diabetes, and I'm positive that it's as a result because, it's all down to cortisol levels. My cortisol levels were super high, running the business. I wasn't sleeping well because I was trying to catch the moments, when baby's sleeping. I should be sleeping too, but then I was working. So I know I really dysregulated my whole body in that period. And it took sort of getting to that low point from a health perspective and realizing something's got to change. I think when they tell you once or twice about all the things that could happen if you do develop diabetes, it's a big wake-up call. I'm like, I don't want to lose my vision. I don't want to have my feet amputated. I think it was really scary. I think I was petrified, and I was surprised that I was on that path. It made me realize I need to look after myself. And I started taking my rest really seriously after that. I had to develop tools that I knew that I was realistically going to be able to follow, because I think there's one thing in following someone else's toolkit, and if you can't stick to it, there's just no point. So something simple like swapping, taking the car and walking instead, getting a Fitbit so that I could track my steps and make sure that I'm actually doing the walks on a regular basis, keeping myself accountable, making sure I sleep on time, and saying, okay, well, this is my cutoff for being on a computer. Not going out too many times during the week. There was a period where I was saying yes to every event. I think I did not know how to say no. So that was something I had to learn, build that muscle of saying no. So now I won't do more than 2 or 3 evening events, and I'll never do it back to back if I can avoid it. Really being picky about, where I spend my time, who I spend my time with as well, because I think just being hyper aware of what drains me and what gives me energy, spending more time outdoors. That's super key. I love the countryside. In another world, I would have a country estate. That's the dream. But making sure, I go into the parks and just enjoy nature, making time for just having a bath. Something as simple as that. I have a bath now, minimum 4 times a week.
Nice.
And I really invest in my bath oils. I invest in my Epsom salts. Little things. It doesn't have to cost a fortune. These are things that help me stay centered. If I feel like I'm starting to get overwhelmed, I have no qualms about canceling things. And I think that's something that I would have struggled to do in the past, but it's not going to help anyone if I crash and burn.
And so what does success look like for you now? What's your working definition of success at the moment?
Honestly, it's joy. And I think you can't really experience joy if you're running around without sort of a clear plan of what gives you joy. I have this picture canvas that I look at every day about the things that give me joy. So it's music, it's theatre, it's obviously the family. So we make a lot of time for family game time. The friendships, making time for all of that, making sure that one doesn't sort of overwhelm the other. I think I'm very intentional about sort of carving out time to do the things that make me happy. Going to places that inspire me, making time for awe, making time to rest. Just more intentionality about how I want to live. I think rather than let sort of life take charge. I need to be in charge. And that's when I feel like I'm leading a successful life. I'm being super intentional about how I spend my time. That time is something I don't joke with anymore.
Let's take it back to the last time we saw each other. Your grandmother's memorial was extraordinary. There was some very serious executive senior women there. It was at the Ivy. There was a host. People gave talks. the most amazing speeches. I cried pretty much the entire time. There was a real published book that was at the time trending on Amazon. You launched a charity off the back of that event. And there was a brand. This is the part that like blew my mind the most. My mom loved a particular skincare brand. You got that brand's CMO to be there. That brand gave out goodie bags. I mean, it was the most like June experience that I could like imagine. And you turn that memorial into a whole production in a way that I now hope makes a lot more sense. Why did you decide to do it that way?
So, kind of going back to my brain. My brain is something I've, over the years been trying to understand. That's why I'm really obsessed with sort of neuroscience. But I'm like a dog with a bone when I get this idea, and that's how I felt with the book. When we got started, I was all in, and I just kept thinking, kind of back to that legacy. I want everyone to know Mama's story, and we were very intentional. I say we, as my mom, my sister, and I, about how we wanted the world to experience Mama, to get to know this incredible woman who grew up in Nigeria, lived in nearly 15 different states with moving her family, like the Von Trapp family. And I guess I'm never afraid to ask the question. And there was no reason Yardley had to say yes, because they didn't know me from anywhere. They didn't know Mama. And but I felt I ought to ask. So I remember when I thought of what I wanted the celebration of Mama to look like, I literally went back to her dressing table, which is where, Mama and I spent a lot of time. And I just remember always thinking, a Yardley bottle is there. And that's what she wore throughout. Every time I'd go back to Lagos on holiday, I'd get her a bottle of Yardley. And I thought, well, if there was a brand that really symbolizes Mama to me and reminds me of Mama, it's Yardley. So I messaged Karen on LinkedIn, probably 4 weeks into sort of accepting this challenge of editing the book and starting to put together what the event might look like, and said, look, this is the story of my grandma. We're putting together an event to honor her and to celebrate the book that we're releasing into the world. We'd love you to be a part of it. And she jumped on a call literally a few days later, told her the story. And on that call, she was like, we're in. The energy that I felt, again, it was that thing of Mama was with us in that call, and it was meant to be. If you told me even 4 weeks prior that we'd be able to have a conversation with Yardley, the Yardley, I would have thought no chance. Why would they care about, this family from Nigeria? But it felt like it was meant to be. And when I tell you the conversations were easy, they really gave us everything we needed. They gave us access to their PR company. We collaborated. It was a true collaboration, and in every sense of the word, because they could see our intentions were pure. It wasn't a commercial exercise. It was, let's get women together in a room. We want to hear the stories of their grandmothers, of their mothers, of the women who have shaped their lives, because we know that these stories exist. And I know I wouldn't be where I am without Mama, without my mom, without my sister. And I really believe in this feminine energy, and how when we do decide to lift each other up, and I think that's what we all felt in that room, understanding how everyone's life had been impacted by some woman in her family who'd cheered her on and believed in her and kind of been there to hear her stories when things were tough. And that was Mama to me. So it was a privilege to have her story kind of heard by so many, as you say, amazing women. Everyone in that room was unbelievable. And I just kept thinking, they all know Mama. They know her story now. And it makes me so happy.
But if you had to pick 3 key learnings that you got from her that stay as kind of one-liners or things.
Mama was incredible at forgiving. And as someone who has struggled with that over time, I always remember how the things that she had to put up with, she married young, she entered a family, just tricky dynamics in some ways with some of the extended family. But she carried herself with such grace that I'm like, goodness, if Mama can do it, so can I, because she just kind of decided that she wasn't going to let any negative energy affect her. She had this incredible spirit of generosity. So even to those people who hadn't necessarily been the nicest to her, she was always generous. She would always have a plate of food ready for you. She would always carry food across the world. Like Mama wouldn't come to London with an empty suitcase. It was like Tupperwares of yummy food from home. And she always thought about others. So that sense of generosity, but just more importantly, that humility. Mama was not a show off. And I talk about this all the time. And, there's a difference in kind of having power, but that, you don't have to like flaunt it. But Mama would tell, presidents something and we'll do it. But, she didn't advertise that in any way. But she carried herself with such grace that it's like when she finally said something, you listened because you knew that the intention behind it was pure. And you didn't question it because it's like she's not going to ask you to do something that's bad for you. And that's how I think of her.
I love that. And I think so much of that shines through in your character and your story. And I hope people have gotten to know a little bit more about June. And the last question that I ask everybody to kind of tie that together is, if I had to watch one film or read one book or go look at one piece of art, have some kind of cultural experience that would help me know you better, what would it be?
I mean, the book that changed my life a lot was probably Mindset. I think it's important that people recognize that, we all have this power within us, and actually how we see the world and decide to see the world determines sort of, whether we really step into our power. And the moment I read that book, I recognized Carol Dweck.
Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Yeah, I feel like that book genuinely, we always have this little whisper in our ear telling us, oh, we can't do these things. And you need to learn to decide what is the information that you're truly going to accept and decide what steps to take next. But you're in charge. And I think that's what this book reminded me, that, I can take charge of these voices and decide what I do next.
Yeah, you are the cavalry.
You have to be the cavalry.
For yourself in your life. Is there anything else that we haven't covered on the theme of slowing down, redefining success that you feel an urge to share? Or?
Well, I think it's so important that people make time. I know we're all very busy. I think make time to know yourself. I think it's very easy. We consume so much. We all listen to other people's stories, but make time to understand what actually drives you, what makes you happy. Don't just copy paste. I think it's very easy in today's culture to see someone who's a couple steps ahead of you and feel that sense of jealousy or worry that, oh, I'll never catch up. But actually, have you thought about your path might be different? And I think it's very important that we trust our gut and don't be afraid to try.
Thank you so much, June.
Thank you, Tiana.
Thank you for tuning in. This episode was hosted and created by me, Tiana Tambridge, produced by Lulu Goad, sound and video production and recorded at Brazen Studios, cover art designed by Natalia Ruhe. This season was sponsored by Kione. Please subscribe to The Slowdown to be notified of upcoming episodes, tell a friend, and please leave a review. It really does help a new podcast like this get out there in the world. And remember, we're all heading to the same destination, and there is no prize for getting there early, so we might as well slow down.